Hey, it's You're All Doomed, the podcast that pokes its way through Friday the 13th, Part 3, 13 minutes at a time. I'm hygienic grocer Greg.
And I'm just Brian.
This chunk begins with Harold in his little work shed, tool shed, shit house, and ends with two girls checking out a sex hammock.
Yeah, in 3D.
So Harold is carrying his errant bunny rabbit back into the little shed where it's kept and notices that something seems to be amiss. He takes a closer look at the rabbit pen and sees that the other rabbits have been slaughtered.
Yeah, and he's like, who would do something like this?
And then there's a fantastic 3D effect of a diamondback rattlesnake striking directly at the camera.
It's so fantastic that you can actually see the wire that's used to control the snake and pull it toward the camera.
Very realistic.
It's just, like, there's no movement to the snake at all other than that it's being pulled toward the camera. There's no, like, it's not striking or anything. It's just this clearly dead or fake snake that's just, tied to a wire.
Yanked toward the camera to provide a 3D scare. My question about this, though, is if it's not like we're supposed to infer that Jason had anything to do with these dead rabbits, so why do we care about these dead rabbits? This is a little moment that's inserted strictly for either a jump scare or just a random 3D effect.
I think it was just an excuse to use that random 3D effect, but it is odd how much it affects Harold. I mean, he runs back into the general store, and it's like he's seen the most horrifying thing in the world. But Edna blames his, reaction on all the junk food that he's been eating. But yeah, it's just weird. Like, okay, there's these rabbits that we've never met before, and it's not even really clear that the rabbits have been killed. He just knows that he sees something really awful in the rabbit cage, and but yeah, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, and his reaction to this fright is more than just emotional. Between the scare of the snake and the mixture of junk food now rotting in his belly, he makes a beeline for the toilet, and we get what might be the most graphic toilet scene in motion picture history.
It is absolutely revolting.
I don't know that we've had a more realistic emergency pooping depiction beyond Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah, he's got some serious issues that he might need to have addressed because whatever's going on in that toilet is just not right.
And they go all out on the sound design and it's
Let's just be thankful that was not a 3D effect that they decided to move forward with.
Good call. He while he's still on the pot, he attempts to soothe his churning guts by drinking some booze straight out of the bottle. Have you ever been so interested in alcohol that you would sit on the toilet mid poop and chug back a few shots?
No, I can't say I have. I mean, there may have been a time in college or something where I was standing at a urinal taking a leak and maybe had a beer in my hand, but no, I certainly don't have like a reserve bottle of whiskey sitting next to the shitter that's, there just in case.
Yeah, my general philosophy is that if something's coming out my back end, I'm really not interested in putting anything in my front end at that moment.
It's a pretty solid philosophy. I'm not going to argue with that. The bathroom that he's in, it doesn't help to clarify where they are anymore because it's got looks like corrugated metal walls, and there's like sheets as closet doors, and I just don't really know. Is this a makeshift bathroom, which makes what he's doing even more horrifying? Like, is he going to have to empty this bucket when he's done, or is it? I just can't really figure out where he is.
Yeah, the layout of this whole complex is very baffling, especially as we'll have a moment coming up here where someone is hiding somewhere in this little area, and I just can't even tell where anything is supposed to be, what the orientation of this room is. It makes no sense from a layout standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned that a few times in throughout the episodes where like geography really is important in movies in general, but I think especially in horror films, because you need to know where someone could be hiding. If someone goes into a room, you need to know how big the room is. You need to know if there's a big, closet in the corner that's big enough for someone to hide in, then that sets up a possibility that someone could be in there, or if there's a shower curtain, those types of things. But if you put someone in like really tight quarters, or if it's really dark, or if you just can't tell how they got from one place to the next, it's hard for you to know, like, kind of think one step ahead like they would. Okay, if they get attacked, where are they going to go to? Well, we don't know, because we don't know where the hell you are. And so that's why I do like when horror films effectively kind of set up the location of where you are, and like, okay, this is the house we're in, this is the shit that's going down, and what all their escape routes could be. No pun intended. And just so far we're just not entirely sure what's going on or where they are right now.
Yeah, and that for me, that really kills a lot of suspense and makes scenes like this more boring to me than anything else. If I understand the layout of the room and I have some orientation of the character's place in it, I'm much more interested and engaged by the looming threat, and I kind of go through the scene with the character. But this is so detached from anything that could possibly be going on that I just kind of zone out while Harold is bumbling around. I would like to point out that his complete lack of interest in hygiene is underscored by the fact that he just did some major bowel movement, and he stands up and puts his pants on without wiping himself clean at all.
That's the most disgusting thing I've seen in any of these movies so far.
So, I mean, he's a mess, this guy.
Yeah, and then back to the confusing geography. He thinks he hears something, and we mentioned that he pulls the sheet back and he doesn't see anything. And then he turns the light on to, I think it's the outside. We don't know. Maybe it's the hallway or something. We don't really know. And he peers out the door and there's nothing there. But then he opens the door, but this time, unfortunately, something is there.
And that something is Jason with a meat cleaver that he promptly buries in Harold's chest.
In 3D.
In 3D.
Yeah, that one's got to hurt too. So, R.I.P. Harold.
Yeah, Harold was played by Steve Susskind, who apparently showed up in Star Trek V, was on an episode of Friends.
Yeah, he was the priest in the episode where Monica and Chandler got married.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to watch that one. He showed up on an episode of Seinfeld, and he was in another Steve Miner movie, the flick House with William Katt. So I'll have to keep an eye out for him next time. Apparently
he was also the voice of the floor manager in Monsters, Inc. I don't know if that was a prominent role or just someone that was just walking by and mumbled something.
Yeah, so Pixar credit. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Sadly, he died in 2005 at the age of 62. I'm sure that he will be missed.
It was a car accident.
Oh, that's terrible.
Now that Harold has been disposed of, we're back in the store/house/cabin/makeshift shitter. And Edna thinks she hears something once again. She figures it's Harold, her stupid husband, and she goes outside to investigate once again. And she's looking around, but this time we see the 3D effect of a rat standing on a shelf.
Yeah, it's climbing along a board towards our face, coming right at us.
So I'll ask you this question because I'm legally blind in one eye, and so I couldn't see 3D even if I wanted to. But so far we've seen like 4 or 5 3D scenes, and have any of these, or would any of these have scared you? We've seen a clothesline handle coming toward the screen. We've seen a snake on a wire. We've seen I think when Harold was holding the fish food, that was in 3D, and a rat standing on the shelf. Are these things that would scare you, or is this just the gimmick at this point?
I mean, scare, no. I think the snake striking, if you were watching this in the movie theater with a crowd of people, that would probably get a pretty good scream, because it was just a quick, kind of startling moment, and fun to have something shooting at you that, your brain immediately recognizes as a snake, even though it, upon further inspection, it's ridiculously fake looking. So that might have been kind of a fun scare. The other ones have just been sort of like, oh, look, you can want to reach out and touch the pole, or like, oh, there's this little rat. Although if I see a rat, I immediately piss all over the floor.
Well, that's the way to do it.
So, yeah, I mean, so far it's more of a gimmick than anything else.
But the sight of the rat certainly does scare Edna, and she backs away, and As she's backing away, an arm reaches through the window and grabs Edna by the face, and we get another 3D effect, this time probably pretty effective, of Jason's hand coming out and grabbing Edna's face and then shoving a knitting needle, looks like, into the back of Edna's head.
Yeah, and Edna was knitting earlier, so we've had the Chekhov's needle payoff here. Interestingly, Jason is wearing a different shirt, so I presume he maybe stole one of Harold's off the clothesline or something. He was, we know that his plaid shirt from earlier had a big tear in the shoulder from where the machete had been. That might have also perhaps severed one of the straps of his overalls, and so he figures he needs some new duds, and I'm guessing he took some clothes off the line. But
before we bid farewell to Edna, I want to make an observation here. Jason's on a little bit of a rampage here pretty quickly at the beginning of this movie. And for the first time, we're really seeing him kill people that are not intruders in his territory. They're just random people. They didn't do anything to, interfere in his life.
No, presumably they've been there, for years.
They've been there for a while. And Jason just decides to show up there and kill them. So this is like the first kind of unprovoked killing spree that we're seeing Jason go on. So it's a little bit of a change of pace.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's almost as though he got fed up with people coming around his territory, and after the confrontation with Ginny, he's all bets are off. He's no more Mr. Nice Guy, and he's just gonna stomp around the entire area and kill anyone he comes across. That's an interesting point.
And I mean, we've only seen maybe 5 minutes of Harold and Edna, but it's also possible that they're just really terrible neighbors, and Jason is just like, I'm fed up with you guys, and I'm just going to get  that you.
I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. Edna was played by an actress named Sherry Moggins. The only credit I found for her that made an impression on me was an episode or two of Dallas, which was a great primetime soap opera back in the 80s.
She was also David Caruso's ex-wife. They were married from 1979 to 1984, so they were married during the filming of this movie.
Oh, wow. Fascinating. David Caruso was in First Blood that came out the same year, so they were both working at the same time. Good for them. We have your favorite flash fade effect immediately following Edna's demise. And we pick up with another great 3D effect of a neighborhood baseball game, and the bat is coming right at the camera. So, yeah, that would not scare me either.
Yeah, a van comes down the street and honks its horn, kind of interrupting the kids' games. And I noticed that there's a canoe strapped to the roof of the van.
Uh-oh, more campers. I suggest, Brian, that you get your name stenciled with roses along your driver's side window on the Honda on your family car.
Who says I already haven't done that?
Okay, well, good.
There are 3 people in the van. We know that is Christine, Chris, Chrissy, some get different names, Debbie, and Jason Gedrick. Andy, sorry.
Well, I was pretty sure that Debbie was Jennifer Aniston, frankly, but...
Yeah, there's definitely a resemblance there. Chrissy's van is a 1979 Dodge Ram Tradesman. I don't know about you, but I think vans, especially old model vans like this, get a bad rap, primarily thanks to serial killers and pedophiles. But I think these vans are kind of cool, and I didn't have anything like that when I was growing up, but I kind of wish I did.
Yeah, I kind of like the 80s image of a cool conversion van like this with like an airbrushed barbarian on the side or some sort of dragon fantasy painting. Like those were always cool.
Yeah, sure, Greg.
So as we're spending a little bit of time with these three people outside of the van, the back of the van opens and another figure emerges and creeps toward this little cluster of people, wearing a pretty creepy, clear plastic face mask that kind of obscures the person's features, but is almost like a terrifying doll. Or
and it's kind of like what also confuses it is it's like kind of clouded with like condensation from breathing, so it's just like it's just hiding a lot of the features, and so you just kind of see this like kind of shapeless shiny face thing coming toward you.
Yeah, the creepiness is a bit undercut by the fact that the person also has a gigantic afro.
Right.
But it turns out that it's our obligatory prankster character who has snuck up behind his friend Andy and plunged a spring-loaded fake knife into his back.
Yeah, everyone please meet Shelley Finkelstein.
Oh, good old Shelley.
Right before Shelley shows up, though, Debbie and Andy are kind of like canoodling as they're walking down the street, and Chris, who seems to be Chrissy, kind of seems to be the responsible one of the group, and she's like, sex, it's all you guys think about, and Andy says something like, well, what's a weekend in the country without sex? And then Debbie looks at Andy like, oh my God, how could you say something like that, Andy? Shut up. And Andy like quickly apologizes and looks at Chrissy, and he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. And Chrissy looks at Andy, and he's like, look, what happened to me at the lake happened a long time ago. And we have no idea what that means, but I just thought it was interesting that Chrissy apparently has some sort of, history at the lake, and she's, maybe going back, somewhat reluctantly.
Yeah, it's a hint that there might be a little bit of a dark past going on there.
But after, Shelley does his little, scare tactic, they're all pissed off at him, understandably, and but it also, I get the impression that this is something that Shelley does all the time, and someone calls him an asshole, and Shelley's response is, I'm not an asshole, I'm an actor, and which I just think doesn't make the situation any better. It just makes them slightly more insufferable.
Well, and I don't know that the actors don't go around pretending to stab people in the back. That's not acting.
And actors can also be assholes, so they're not mutually exclusive things.
Right. This group of friends is apparently stopping in this neighborhood to pick up another person that's going on their weekend getaway. So they knock on the door of this house, and they meet Mrs. Sanchez, who hopefully it's not intended to be a racial stereotype that she's dressed like a maid. That seemed a little bit sketchy to me.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if she was the maid or if she was the mother. I mean, we find out that it was the mother, but yeah, I noticed that too when she answered the door. I'm like, wow, this is like, the house is nothing remarkable, and then they have a maid? And I'm like, oh, no, wait, that's the mother.
And then we meet Mrs. Sanchez's daughter, Vera, who I swear to God, until we watched this movie this time, I always thought that was Catherine Mary Stewart. I was shocked to learn that it's not.
Yeah. And we figure out that the reason why they're picking up Vera is because they're trying to set her up with Shelley. I don't think Shelley knows that they're trying to set him up with someone, but I don't think Vera necessarily knows who she's being set up with. So when it's revealed that the two are being reluctantly paired together, Shelley kind of apologizes because he knows that she's probably disappointed, and
he knows right away that she's way out of his league.
Yeah, and she's a little bummed out too. So I feel a little bad for Shelley, but it's also kind of an awkward situation to presume that these people would be interested in each other.
Yeah, that's just poor matchmaking. The tension of that moment is immediately diffused when someone notices that the van appears to be on fire. Smoke is pouring out of the doors and windows. So they run over to investigate and throw open the back doors, and it's just the two stoner friends that they've brought with them.
Yeah, Mark Maron and some girl. I mean, sorry, it's Chuck Garth, and the girl's name is Chili. I have a question about these two. They do not look like they would be friends with the rest of the group.
The next note I have here, other than the 3D effect of passing a joint, is why did they bring Chuck and Chili along? These people are like 35 years old.
At least, yeah. And they're like total stoner hippies, and the rest of the group are, in college probably. And they just don't, it doesn't make any sense for them to be there.
The only thing I can think of is that they're the weed connection. So
it's possible. Yeah.
Andy invited them along so that they would have all of the herb they needed to enjoy their weekend sex getaway. A couple other interesting details that we learn while the group is driving off in the van. We learn that Jennifer Aniston is pregnant. I find that kind of humorous because she doesn't look the least bit pregnant.
Not even, remotely.
So she can only be, a few weeks pregnant at this point. But also, it just cracks me up that she's been impregnated by this guy, Andy, who still has a roommate. So, I mean, not that...
I think Shelley's his roommate.
Yeah, Shelley is his roommate. So it's not like nobody can, their living situation is what it is, and maybe they don't have enough money to get a house yet or anything like that. But it just seems like a weird mixture of maturity and immaturity. So it kind of sets me... I don't have a clear picture of Andy's place in the world at the moment. He's obviously got a lady love that he's knocked up, but he doesn't have his shit together enough to get his own place.
He's definitely closer in terms of personality to Shelley, like a kind of a immature goofball than he is to the girls who seem to be more mature and put together.
Yeah.
And responsible. There's a pretty strange dynamic going on here. As the van is driving down the road, everyone's kind of piled in the back. There's no seats in the back. It's just kind of like an open bed. And Vera asks Shelley why he's carrying this little kind of like hard case, briefcase around and wants to know what's in it. And Shelley says, "My whole world is in here." And Vera's like, "Well, what the hell does that mean?" And Shelley's like, "Well, stick around and you'll see." And we're like, "Oh, great."
Yeah, you can't just answer her question, dude.
Yeah.
Play it cool. Just be like, "Oh, it's a bunch of stuff that I use to play jokes on people."
Yeah. But as they're doing this, we see two cop cars that are just flying up the street behind them, and they're speeding up to the van. And, remember that there's people in the van that are smoking pot. And so understandably, everyone in the van starts to freak out, and they figure that the cops are coming for them. So they decide they need to get rid of the pot. There's no way to do it other than to eat it. And so they're all just stuffing these, bags of pot in their mouth, and it's just flying everywhere. And it's kind of comical and not very, stressful. And then, as all of their mouths are filled with pot, the cop cars go flying by them, and they're actually on their way to something else, and nothing to do with the people in the van, and so they're all just like, "Oh."
Yeah, for some reason it made me think of Super Troopers this time.
Yeah.
So everyone in the van quickly learns that the police units were racing to the crime scene of Edna and Harold's murder, and so the van reaches that murder site themselves. And we see a bunch of rubberneckers milling around outside the general store shithouse. One guy is wearing a Hawaiian shirt and short shorts. I'm pretty sure it's Kenny Loggins. I think we've got a Kenny Loggins cameo here. As they slowly cruise past and see that something bad has happened here, we get another hint that Chris is uncomfortable being back in this neck of the woods and that something happened to her years ago. There's another reference to, her, it's okay, Chris, it's not going to happen again, or something like that. So she's definitely
because there's like body bags coming out of the building, and she is notably concerned.
Yeah, she's definitely got some issues to work through. We also see a random dead bunny rabbit by the side of the road. I was curious if that was Harold's rabbit. Did Jason take it with him and take a chunk out of it, or was it?
It could have been. No, I didn't think about that, because Harold was carrying the rabbit to take it back into the cage, and then he saw the snake, so he probably dropped the rabbit. Maybe the rabbit ran away, and it maybe got hit by a car or something, or maybe Jason killed it. But yeah, I think it's highly likely that that's Harold's rabbit.
Or is Crystal Lake infested with rabbits? Who knows?
The van goes past the crime scene and drives down the road a little bit, and they suddenly have to slam on the brakes because there's some dude taking a nap in the middle of the road. And obviously they're a little curious about what's going on, so everyone gets out to figure it out. And Chuck says the stoner says that the man looks just like his grandfather. It's just kind of a throwaway reference. It would have been kind of funny if it was his grandfather just laying in the middle of the road. But
Grandpa.
They help the guy up, and he immediately starts telling everyone what he found today. And he's just kind of like rambling, and he's kind of got these like crazy eyes, and they're looking all over the place. And he suddenly holds up an eyeball wrapped in plastic wrap and holds it up to the camera, so it's very much
3D effect of the eyeball coming right at you.
But it's just an eyeball, and it's kind of hard to see at first what it is. It's just kind of like this blobby mess in a plastic bag, and he's holding it up, and they look at it for a second, and then it takes them a minute to realize, they're like, holy shit, that's like a eyeball. What the hell is your problem, dude? And the guy says that there were other parts too, and that, God wanted him to find these parts so he could warn people. And he considers it an omen, and that, consider themselves warned. And he's basically Crazy Ralph of part 3.
Yeah, I have some problems with this whole moment. I mean, right off the bat, I think it's implausible that Chris, who was driving the van, didn't see a person laying in the road and has to screech to a halt.
Yeah, they barely miss him.
They barely miss hitting him, running him over, and they kind of hand wave it away with saying that Chris was daydreaming, probably thinking about her traumatic experience, But nonetheless, I find that a little bit implausible that someone didn't give her more of a warning or whatever. And then, yeah, just the fact that this is really a pale imitation of Crazy Ralph. He's a doomsayer. He's obviously a nutcase. But, I mean, yeah.
But the other thing is, like, I think on the surface I can see why they wanted to have a Crazy Ralph character, because Crazy Ralph was popular and now he's dead, and so they needed someone to take his place. But that role is no longer necessary in these movies because we know what's going on.
Right.
In the first one, he was introducing the fact that, this camp they were going to was a bad idea and they should stay away. And then we find out later why. And in the second one, it's a new group of people and they're, in a slightly different location, but they're close by, and he wants to warn them again. And it's also a different killer. But now we know it's Jason. And it's serving as a warning for the people in the van.
But they just drove past a murder scene. So
they know something bad is going on in the area. They don't need this crazy cowboy dude to, explain it to them. So fortunately, it's a pretty brief scene, but it really is unnecessary, and the guy does not hold a candle to Crazy Ralph. So.
Agreed. Once they shake off the crazy guy laying in the road, the van continues on to its destination, and we pass a little carved sign by the driveway. This is Higgins Haven. So I presume that Chris is Chris Higgins, and that it's her family's summer home or something like that. The van drives over a rickety bridge, and the camera lingers on it just long enough to make me think they're establishing that this bridge might come into play later on.
Yeah, possibly.
We'll see. As the van reaches the front of the house, we see from the inside someone wearing a plaid shirt watching through the window. We also hear the key, ma, 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 key, ma, ma, ma. So, I don't know, this person with the plaid shirt might be Jason. Chris gets out of the van. Everybody gets out of the van. She's very concerned with getting the bags inside.
But everyone else is acting like they've seen water for the very first time.
Yeah.
And they all just run toward the lake like, oh my God.
They all want to go skinny dipping right away.
Yep.
But she says it twice that she wants the bags inside. So she heads in the door and encounters the plaid shirt wearing person.
It's Rick Bombay, which is a fantastic last name. And he has the nerve to be annoyed that Christy wasn't impressed by his threatening gesture of grabbing her by the throat.
Yeah, here's a pro tip. Never grab a girl's neck and throw her against the wall as a surprise. Couple of things here. First of all, I don't like the fact that they used the kiki ma 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 motif when it's not Jason. That's a deliberate misdirect.
Cheat. Yeah.
It should be just like the shark theme in Jaws. When you hear the theme, you know it's actually the shark. If you don't, you know it's not. So that kind of annoyed me. And then Rick immediately sets my teeth on edge with his attitude. Throwing her against the wall and then saying, did it get cold in here? Did I do something wrong? Yeah, Rick, you're an asshole.
Yeah, he's a real dick about it. And then the part that I also don't like is that Chrissy apologizes for her reaction, for not, approving or welcoming this gesture. And I'm like, no, girl, like, you're in the right here.
Yeah, you don't
He's
need to
an
back
ass.
down at all, Chris.
Yeah,
you should get in his face even more.
Yeah, so it bugged me for a couple of reasons. Like you said, one, Rick comes off as a real asshole, but then Chrissy comes off as kind of passive and weak because she's like, oh, no, I'm sorry. Like, she doesn't want to upset everyone. And I'm like, no, you should be standing up here and saying, you're an asshole.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially because, I mean, it's made pretty clear that it's been 2 years since they've seen each other. And so, I mean, he should have been much more welcoming and happy to see her instead of this weird kind of sexually aggressive move that,
Well,
you know.
I don't know. I don't know if it's been that long since she's seen Rick. It's been 2 years since she's been back to Higgins Haven.
Okay, fair point.
Because that's why she kind of apologizes for her reaction to Rick's choke. She's like, I'm sorry. It's just, I'm on edge. It's being back here. I know it's been 2 years, but it's, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I
That's a good point. They don't clearly establish how long it's been since Rick and Chris have seen each other, but we get the sense that it's been some amount of time, and he makes some comment about, there's only so many cold showers I can take. Well, that's too bad, man. Just deal with it.
Yeah, he's not setting himself up as a very likable character from the beginning.
No, and then she kind of placates things by jumping on his back, piggyback style, and he immediately negs her by commenting about how she's put on weight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was funny because when I was watching this chunk, my wife was sewing in the other room, and I could hear her just kind of grinding her teeth, and she's no fan of Rick, even though she's not even watching the movie.
While we are piling on Rick, I also noticed that he has terrible posture. His like shoulders are slumped and he's kind of humped over. And I apologize if the actor has some sort of back condition that causes him to walk that way. But I just noticed that he's just very kind of like slumped over and
yeah, he's got interesting posture,
almost like he's defeated. So I don't know if it was intentional or if that's just how he stands. But it was something that stood out to me. Rick and Chrissy make their way to the van and she's irrationally concerned by the fact that the side door of the van is open and it wasn't open before apparently, which I don't know what the big deal is because everyone else is just 200 yards away playing in the lake, so it's quite possible someone just ran back to the van to get something. But we actually find out that the reason the door is open is because Shelley is in the back, and he said everyone else is skinny dipping, but he's not skinny enough to do it. So I feel a little bad for Shelley. He's this date that they were supposedly setting him up with isn't working out, and now the group is off doing something that he doesn't feel comfortable doing, so he's definitely kind of the outcast of the group, and I feel a little bad for him.
Yeah, he's definitely outside of his comfort zone, and I'm sympathetic to that, but I don't think he's doing himself any favors by trying to relate to everyone with his jokes and scares and things like that.
Everyone finishes skinny dipping, and they head back into the house, and Chrissy's kind of showing Debbie around. And as Debbie's looking around the room, Chrissy looks out the window. They're upstairs, and she thinks she sees someone go into a barn across the way. It's not very far away from where this house is. And it kind of spooks her, but she's not really sure. Maybe she imagined it. And so she focuses her attention back on Debbie and informs her that she's going to be sleeping in a hammock in their room. Yeah,
Debbie's first thought is, well, where's the bed? Andy and I want to plow each other all weekend. And Chris beckons to the wall and says, it's right there. And it's a hammock strung on the wall.
Just what a pregnant girl needs.
Yeah, exactly. So we have our first appearance of the sex hammock, which we'll come back to a little bit later. I don't think I've got anything else for this chunk. Brian, do you?
No, that covers everything for me.
We have a kill count of 2 so far. It's just Edna and Harold.
The Hockett family is devastated,
completely wiped out, and the bunnies. I forgot about the bunnies.
Yeah, and that shitter that he was on. Rest in peace.
Yeah, seriously. Well, until next time, thanks for joining us. I've been Greg,
and I've been Brian.
You're all doomed.